The crystal chandelier sparkled above the elegant dining room as Trevor Clark stood up, wine glass in hand, his mother Eleanor's 70th birthday guests all turning to look at him expectantly. But what he said next would shatter everything Naomi thought she knew about her life. "I have an announcement to make," Trevor said, his voice carrying across the London mansion. "I'm leaving my wife for the woman I truly love, Brittany." The gasps around the table felt like thunder in Naomi's ears, but what hurt more was seeing the knowing looks. They weren't surprised. They had all known this was coming. Every single person at that table, his family, his friends, they were all in on it. And Naomi, the successful African-American marketing executive who had built her own company from nothing, was sitting there like a fool, watching her husband destroy her in front of everyone. But what Trevor didn't know was that Naomi had discovered his plan 3 days ago. And she had spent every moment since then preparing for this exact moment. 3 days earlier, Naomi was folding clothes for their London trip when Trevor's phone buzzed on the bed. She glanced at it without thinking and her blood turned cold. Can't wait to be free of her. Mother has everything ready for the birthday announcement. She'll be so humiliated she'll probably just disappear back to America. The message was from someone named B with a heart emoji. Naomi's hands shook as she picked up the phone. More messages filled the screen. "Your mother was right. If we do it publicly like this, she won't fight the divorce. She'll be too embarrassed. The lawyer said if we can prove she's unstable, we can get her company too. Mother's been documenting everything. I love you, Trevor. Soon we won't have to hide anymore." Naomi sank onto the bed, her successful life crumbling around her. Trevor wasn't just cheating. He was planning to destroy her completely. And his mother Eleanor, who had never liked Naomi, was helping him do it. But Trevor had made one mistake. He thought Naomi was weak. He thought she would crumble under public humiliation. He had no idea that the woman he married had clawed her way up from nothing, had built $1 million marketing company through pure determination, and had survived things much worse than a cheating husband. When Trevor walked into the bedroom an hour later, Naomi was calmly finishing packing. "Ready for London, baby?" he asked, kissing her cheek like nothing was wrong. "Absolutely," Naomi smiled, her voice steady. "I can't wait to see what your mother has planned." Trevor grinned, thinking he was so clever. "She's really pulled out all the stops this year. It's going to be unforgettable." "I'm sure it will be," Naomi replied, already planning her counterattack. That night, while Trevor slept, Naomi made 3 phone calls. The first was to Rachel Martinez, her lawyer and college roommate. The second was to her private investigator. The third was to her assistant, giving her very specific instructions about their London itinerary. "Rachel, I need you to listen carefully," Naomi whispered into the phone. "Trevor's planning to destroy me and I need to be ready." "What do you need me to do?" Rachel asked without hesitation. "Everything. I need you to freeze our accounts, secure my business assets, and meet me in London with backup. This is going to be bigger than just divorce court." As Naomi hung up the phone, she looked at her sleeping husband. He had no idea that the woman he was planning to humiliate was about to become his worst nightmare. The next morning, Trevor was extra affectionate, probably feeling guilty about what he was planning. He brought her coffee in bed and talked excitedly about seeing his family. "Mother's so excited to see you," he lied smoothly. "She's been planning this party for months." "I'm sure she has," Naomi replied, thinking about Eleanor's messages she'd found on Trevor's phone. The woman had been documenting every argument they'd had, every time Naomi had been tired from work, every moment that could be twisted to make her look unstable. But two could play that game. While Trevor was in the shower, Naomi went through his laptop. What she found made her stomach turn. Bank statements showing money being moved to accounts she didn't know about. Client files from her company that he had no business having. Email exchanges with someone named Brittany Walsh, his secretary, that went back 2 years. They hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been planning this destruction systematically. Trevor had been stealing from her company, moving their money, and building a case to take everything she'd worked for. But the worst part was reading Eleanor's emails. Trevor's mother had been helping him every step of the way, even suggesting ways to make Naomi look bad to their friends and family. If you can get her to have an outburst at the party, everyone will see how unstable she really is. Then the divorce will be easy, and you can claim she's unfit to run her business. Naomi closed the laptop and smiled. Trevor and Eleanor thought they were so smart. They thought they were the only ones capable of planning and scheming. They had no idea that Naomi had been fighting for everything her whole life, and she wasn't about to stop now. By the time they left for the airport, Naomi had copies of everything. Bank records, emails, text messages, financial documents. She had enough evidence to bury Trevor and his mother, and she was going to enjoy every second of it. As their plane lifted off for London, Trevor held her hand and smiled at her lovingly. "This trip is going to change everything," he said. "Yes," Naomi agreed, squeezing his hand back. "It really is." The first-class cabin was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines, but Naomi's mind was racing faster than the plane cutting through the clouds. Beside her, Trevor was texting furiously, his phone tilted away from her view, but she could see the satisfied smirk on his face with each message he sent. Naomi pretended to sleep, watching through barely open eyes as Trevor typed message after message. Every few minutes, his phone would buzz with a response, and his smile would grow wider. She could only imagine what he and Brittany were saying to each other, probably talking about how easy this was going to be. What Trevor didn't know was that Naomi had her own phone hidden in her purse, recording everything. Her private investigator had installed special software that could capture audio and video without anyone knowing. Every conversation, every phone call, every moment was being documented. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into London," the pilot announced. Trevor put his phone away and turned to Naomi with fake concern. "You okay, baby? You've been quiet the whole flight." "Just thinking about seeing your family," Naomi replied smoothly. "Your mother always makes such an impression." Trevor's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "She's really excited about this party. She said it's going to be the social event of the year." "I bet it will be," Naomi said, thinking about the legal papers Rachel was preparing back in New York. While Trevor was planning his big announcement, Naomi's team was securing her business, protecting her assets, and building an airtight case against him. During the flight, Naomi had received several encrypted messages on her secure phone. Rachel had found more than they'd expected. Trevor hadn't just been stealing money, he'd been selling her client information to competitors. Her private investigator had traced payments going back 18 months. Trevor and Brittany had made over $200,000 betraying her trust and sabotaging her business. But they'd been sloppy. Every transaction was traceable. Every stolen file had digital fingerprints. Every lie Trevor had told was documented in emails he thought were private. "I was thinking," Trevor said as they gathered their luggage, "maybe we should stay an extra few days after the party. Mother would love to spend more time with you." Naomi almost laughed. Eleanor Clark had never wanted to spend time with her. The woman had made it clear from day one that she thought Trevor had married beneath him. An African-American woman from a working-class family wasn't good enough for her precious son, no matter how successful Naomi had become. "That sounds wonderful," Naomi replied. "I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about." The London airport was busy, but Naomi spotted Rachel immediately. Her lawyer friend was pretending to read a newspaper near the baggage claim, dressed like any other business traveler. Their eyes met briefly, and Rachel gave an almost invisible nod. Everything was in place. In the taxi to Eleanor's Kensington mansion, Trevor kept checking his phone. Naomi could see him typing messages to Bea, probably telling Brittany they'd landed safely and the plan was moving forward. "Nervous about seeing Mother?" Trevor asked, misinterpreting the tension he sensed from Naomi. "Not nervous," Naomi said truthfully. "More like, prepared." The taxi pulled up to Eleanor's massive Victorian home, and Naomi felt a familiar pang of inadequacy. This was where Trevor had grown up in luxury, with servants and gardeners and more money than most people could imagine. When they'd first started dating, she'd been intimidated by all of this wealth and privilege. But not anymore. Naomi had built her own success, earned her own money, created her own empire. She didn't need to be intimidated by old money when she'd proven she could create new money through hard work and intelligence. Eleanor greeted them at the door with air kisses and fake warmth. "Naomi, darling, you look tired. The flight must have been exhausting." "Not at all," Naomi smiled brightly. "I feel more energized than I have in months." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her perfect hostess facade. "Well, you'll want to rest before tomorrow's celebration. I've planned something very special." "I'm sure you have," Naomi replied, thinking about the legal documents that would be served tomorrow night. "I'm looking forward to all the surprises." As they walked through the mansion, Naomi noticed how Trevor and his mother exchanged meaningful looks. They were so confident in their plan, so sure that they had outsmarted her. Trevor probably thought he was being subtle when he excused himself to make some business calls, undoubtedly to finalize arrangements with Brittany. Alone in their guest room, Naomi opened her laptop and reviewed the files Rachel had sent. Financial records, phone logs, email chains, bank transfers, everything they needed to prove Trevor's betrayal and theft. Her private investigator had even found evidence that Brittany was married to someone else, making her affair with Trevor even more complicated. But the most damaging evidence was the recording she'd made of Trevor's phone calls. While he thought he was being careful, Naomi had been listening to every conversation. She knew about the bank accounts he'd opened in secret. She knew about the clients he'd stolen from her company. She knew about the money he and Brittany had been hiding. Most importantly, she knew that tomorrow night's announcement was designed to be so public and humiliating that she would be too embarrassed to fight back. Trevor and Eleanor thought shame would make her weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Everything's ready. Legal papers filed, accounts secured, evidence compiled. Are you sure you want to do this tomorrow? Naomi typed back, more sure than I've ever been about anything. When Trevor returned from his business calls, he was practically glowing with excitement. Tomorrow's going to be perfect, he said, pulling her close for a kiss that made her skin crawl. Yes, Naomi agreed, thinking about the look on his face when she revealed what she knew. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Eleanor's mansion was transformed into something from a fairy tale, with hundreds of white roses, crystal decorations, and servers in crisp uniforms carrying silver trays. The guest list read like a who's who of London society: judges, politicians, business leaders, and social elites. This wasn't just a birthday party, it was a stage for Trevor's grand performance. Naomi stood in front of the mirror in their guest room, applying her makeup with steady hands. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a stunning midnight blue dress that made her dark skin glow, paired with the diamond earrings Trevor had given her for their anniversary. She wanted to look absolutely perfect when she destroyed him. You look beautiful, Trevor said, adjusting his tie. He seemed nervous, probably going over his speech in his head. Mother will be so proud to have you there tonight. I'm sure she will be, Naomi replied, thinking about Eleanor's real feelings. She'd found more messages on Trevor's phone this morning, including one from his mother saying she'd prepared the family for tonight's announcement and that everyone would support Trevor's decision to upgrade his wife. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. A young woman entered, blonde, petite, wearing a simple black dress that screamed expensive. She had the nervous energy of someone trying too hard to appear casual. Hi, the woman said with a bright smile. I'm Brittany Walsh. I work with Trevor. He asked me to check if you need anything before the party starts. Naomi turned slowly, studying the woman who had been sleeping with her husband for 2 years. Brittany was pretty in a conventional way, but there was something calculated about her smile, something cold in her blue eyes. How thoughtful, Naomi said pleasantly. You must be very close to the family to be invited to such an intimate celebration. Brittany's cheeks flushed slightly. Eleanor has been so kind to me. She says I'm like the daughter she always wanted. The insult was clear, but Naomi just smiled wider. How lovely. And how is your husband handling you working such long hours with Trevor? The color drained from Brittany's face. My, what? Your husband. Mark Walsh, isn't it? I believe he works in finance. Naomi watched as panic flashed across Brittany's features. Trevor mentioned you were married. I hope he doesn't mind you traveling so much for work. Brittany stammered something about divorce papers and separated living arrangements, but Naomi could see the lies crumbling. Her private investigator had been thorough. Brittany was still very much married, and her husband had no idea about her affair with Trevor. Well, I should go help Eleanor with the final preparations, Brittany said quickly, backing toward the door. Of course. I'm sure tonight will be unforgettable for all of us. After Brittany left, Naomi checked her secure phone. Rachel had arrived in London and was staying at a hotel nearby with a team of lawyers and investigators. Everything was in place. Downstairs, the party was in full swing. Eleanor held court in the center of the room, accepting compliments and birthday wishes from her guests. She looked magnificent in purple silk, every inch the society matriarch. When she saw Naomi approaching, her smile became strained. Naomi dear, you look lovely. Though perhaps that dress is a bit much for a family gathering. Thank you, Eleanor. I wanted to look my best for such a special occasion. Trevor has been talking about tonight for weeks. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Yes, well, birthdays are perfect times for new beginnings, don't you think? Absolutely. Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make room for something better. The older woman nodded approvingly, completely missing the real meaning behind Naomi's words. As the evening progressed, Naomi watched the carefully orchestrated performance. Trevor was charming and attentive, playing the perfect husband for a few more hours. Brittany stayed on the opposite side of the room, but Naomi caught the stolen glances they exchanged, the secret smiles that they thought no one noticed. Eleanor's friends made polite conversation with Naomi, but she could sense their curiosity. They were waiting for something to happen, had probably been told to expect some drama tonight. The anticipation in the room was almost electric. During cocktails, Naomi overheard two of Eleanor's society friends whispering near the fireplace. Eleanor says there's going to be an announcement after dinner. Something about Trevor finally coming to his senses. About time. That American wife of his never really fit in, did she? Too ambitious. Too independent. Well, Eleanor found him someone much more suitable. That lovely girl Brittany, she's perfect for the family. Naomi smiled to herself. They had no idea that their perfect Brittany was a liar, a thief, and an adulteress who was still married to someone else. They were all so focused on her skin color and background that they'd never bothered to actually investigate the woman they thought was so much better. At dinner, Naomi was seated between two of Trevor's uncles, who spent the entire meal talking around her like she wasn't there. They discussed business deals, family investments, and social connections as if she was invisible. It was clear that Eleanor had briefed everyone on how to treat her tonight with polite distance, like someone who wouldn't be around much longer. But Naomi wasn't invisible. She was watching everything, listening to every word, documenting every slight and every assumption. When this was over, she was going to remember exactly who had treated her with disrespect, and who had been kind. As the main course was cleared away, Trevor stood up and tapped his wine glass with a knife. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward him expectantly. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends," he began, his voice carrying across the elegant dining room. "As we celebrate my mother's 70th birthday, I have something important to share with all of you." Naomi felt her heart rate slow down, felt that familiar calm that came over her in high-pressure situations. This was it. The moment Trevor thought would destroy her. Instead, it was going to be the moment that destroyed him. Eleanor was beaming with pride, Brittany was trying to look surprised, and the guests were leaning forward with anticipation. Trevor looked directly at Naomi, his eyes cold and calculating. Sometimes in life you realize you've made mistakes. Sometimes you realize you're living a lie. The room was completely silent now, hanging on his every word. "Tonight, I want to be honest with all of you," Trevor continued, his voice getting stronger. "I want to tell you the truth about my marriage and about the woman I really love." Naomi met his eyes steadily, her expression calm and serene. "Come on, Trevor," she thought. "Show everyone who you really are." Trevor's voice rang out clear and confident across the silent dining room, every guest hanging on his words. "The truth is, I married the wrong woman. I settled for someone who seemed successful on the surface, but who has been lying to me, to all of us, for years." Naomi sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, watching her husband destroy himself with every word. Around the table she could see the guests' faces, some shocked, some excited by the drama, some nodding like they'd expected this all along. "Naomi has been stealing from her own clients," Trevor continued, his voice gaining strength as he warmed to his performance. "She's been unstable, erratic, impossible to live with. She's threatened me, manipulated me, and made my life a living hell." Eleanor was nodding approvingly, her eyes bright with satisfaction. Brittany sat across the room trying to look surprised, but Naomi could see the anticipation in her expression. "But I found real love," Trevor said, turning toward Brittany with a tender smile. "Someone who supports me, who understands me, who shares my values and background. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm leaving my wife for Brittany Walsh, the woman who should have been my wife all along." The gasps and murmurs around the table were immediate. Several guests turned to look at Naomi, expecting tears, rage, or a dramatic breakdown. Instead, they found her sitting calmly, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Brittany and I have been planning this for months," Trevor continued, emboldened by what he thought was Naomi's stunned silence. "Mother has been helping us prepare for a future together, a future without lies and deception." Eleanor stood up, raising her wine glass. "I couldn't be prouder of my son for finally finding the courage to choose happiness over obligation. Brittany dear, welcome to the family." The room erupted in polite applause, though Naomi noticed several guests looking uncomfortable. A few were still staring at her, waiting for her reaction. Trevor sat down, looking triumphant. He reached across the table to squeeze Brittany's hand, completely confident that he had just delivered the perfect killing blow to his wife's reputation and spirit. That's when Naomi began to laugh. It started as a soft chuckle, but quickly grew into genuine laughter that echoed through the dining room. Every head turned toward her, confusion replacing the expectation on their faces. "Oh, Trevor," Naomi said, wiping tears from her eyes as her laughter subsided. "That was beautiful. Really. You almost had me convinced that you actually believed all of that." Trevor's confident expression wavered. "What are you talking about?" Naomi stood up gracefully, her midnight blue dress catching the light from the chandelier above. "I'm talking about the fact that everything you just said was a lie. But then again, lying is what you do best, isn't it?" "Sit down, Naomi," Eleanor hissed. "You're making a scene." "Oh, Eleanor, I'm just getting started." Naomi's voice carried clearly through the room, calm and controlled. "See, while Trevor was planning this little performance, I was doing some research of my own." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "For instance, I found it interesting that Trevor accused me of stealing from my clients. Would you like to know what I actually found?" Trevor's face was turning pale. "Whatever you think you know." "I know that you've been selling my client information to competitors for the past 18 months, Naomi interrupted smoothly. "I know that you've stolen over $200,000 from accounts that you thought I didn't monitor. I know that you've been forging my signature on business documents and using my company credit cards for your little romantic getaways." The room was dead silent now. Several guests were looking between Trevor and Naomi with growing shock. "That's ridiculous," Trevor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can't prove any of that." Naomi smiled. "Actually, I can. See, while you were busy texting your girlfriend and planning my public humiliation, I was working with my lawyers, my accountants, and a very thorough private investigator." She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "Bank records showing wire transfers from your secret accounts. Email printouts detailing your client information sales. Phone records showing hundreds of calls to competitors during business hours." "Should I go on?" Eleanor was staring at her son with growing horror. "Trevor, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," Trevor said desperately. "She's trying to save face by making up stories." "Am I?" Naomi turned to face Brittany, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Tell me, Brittany, does your husband Mark know about your relationship with Trevor? Or is he still under the impression that you're working late at the office?" Brittany's face went white. We're separated." "Funny because I spoke to Mark yesterday. Lovely man. He had no idea his wife was having an affair. He thought she was working hard to support their family. He even mentioned how proud he was of her dedication to her job." The room was starting to buzz with whispers. Eleanor's society friends were looking scandalized, not by Naomi's accusations, but by the implications of what they were hearing. "You called my husband?" Brittany whispered. "Oh, that's not all I called." Naomi pulled out her phone. "I also called the ethics board at Trevor's company. Turns out they're very interested in employees who sell confidential information. And the tax authorities are fascinated by those secret bank accounts." Trevor jumped to his feet. "Stop this right now." "What? Embarrassed?" Naomi's voice was sharp now. "Feeling humiliated in front of all these people? Good. Now you know exactly how you wanted me to feel." Eleanor stood up shakily. I think we should discuss this privately." "No, Eleanor. You wanted a public announcement, you're going to get one." Naomi turned back to the room full of guests. "See, everyone here was expecting to watch me get humiliated tonight. You were all in on the joke, weren't you?" Poor Naomi finally getting what she deserves. The ambitious American woman who never quite fit in. Several guests had the grace to look ashamed, but Naomi wasn't finished. "But here's what you didn't know. While you were all assuming I was too weak, too devastated, too embarrassed to fight back, I was building a case that's going to send my dear husband to prison." The word prison sent a shocked murmur through the room. Trevor was backing away from the table. "You can't. There's no evidence of anything illegal. Embezzlement is illegal, Trevor. Fraud is illegal. Identity theft is illegal. Wire fraud is illegal. Should I continue?" Brittany was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Eleanor was gripping the back of her chair, her face ashen. "But the best part," Naomi continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, "is that while you were planning to take my company away from me, I was securing every asset, every account, every piece of intellectual property. My lawyers filed papers 3 hours ago. Trevor, you don't own anything anymore. And Brittany, your employment was terminated this morning." The silence in the room was deafening. Then, slowly, Naomi began to hear the sound of approaching sirens. The sirens grew louder, and Trevor's face went from pale to completely white. Through the tall windows of Eleanor's dining room, blue and red lights began flashing against the walls, creating an almost surreal atmosphere in the elegant space. "What did you do?" Trevor whispered, his voice barely audible above the growing sound of emergency vehicles. "I did what you taught me to do," Naomi replied calmly. "I planned ahead. I documented everything. I built an airtight case." She turned to address the room full of stunned guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Detective Inspector Sarah Chin and her team from the Metropolitan Police Fraud Unit." The dining room doors opened and several police officers entered, led by a professional-looking Asian woman in a sharp suit. Behind them came three people. Naomi recognized Rachel Martinez, her lawyer, and two investigators from her legal team. "Trevor Clark." Detective Inspector Chin addressed the room. Trevor seemed frozen, unable to speak or move. "That's him," Naomi said helpfully. "The one who looks like he's about to be sick. Mr. Clark, you're under arrest on suspicion of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court." As the officer continued reading Trevor's rights, Eleanor finally found her voice. "This is outrageous. You can't just barge into my home and arrest my son based on the word of a vindictive wife." Rachel stepped forward, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "Actually, Mrs. Clark, we can. Your son has been under investigation for several weeks now, based on substantial evidence of criminal activity. Evidence that was gathered illegally." Eleanor protested. "All evidence was obtained through legal channels," Rachel replied smoothly. "Financial records, business documents, recorded phone conversations with consent from at least one party, all perfectly admissible in court." Naomi watched as the handcuffs were placed on Trevor's wrists. He looked at her with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "You recorded my phone calls?" "I recorded everything, Trevor. Every lie, every plan, every conversation where you and your mother discussed destroying me." Naomi pulled out a small digital recorder. "For instance, would you like to hear the conversation from Tuesday where you told Brittany that I was too stupid to realize what was happening?" Brittany was sobbing openly now, her perfect makeup completely ruined. "This isn't what was supposed to happen." "No, it's not," Naomi agreed. "You were supposed to get my husband, my money, and my business while I slunk away in shame. Unfortunately for you, I'm not as easy to destroy as you thought." Detective Chin turned to Brittany. "Ms. Walsh will need you to come with us as well. You're being arrested in connection with the theft and sale of confidential business information." "But I was just following orders." Brittany protested as another officer approached her with handcuffs. "That's not really a defense," Rachel pointed out dryly. Eleanor was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "This is all a misunderstanding. There's no way Trevor would do anything illegal." Naomi opened her folder again and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "Would you like to see the bank records, Eleanor? The ones showing regular transfers from Trevor's accounts to yours? The ones that started right after he began selling my client information?" The older woman's face went gray. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Naomi turned to Detective Chin. "Inspector, Mrs. Clark was instrumental in planning this fraud. I have recorded conversations where she suggests ways to frame me for embezzlement and discusses how to manipulate legal proceedings to ensure Trevor gets my business assets." That's not." Eleanor stammered. Rachel stepped forward with another set of documents. "Mrs. Clark, based on evidence provided by Mrs. Naomi Clark, we'll also need you to come with us for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to embezzlement." The room erupted in shocked whispers as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Eleanor Clark, the society matriarch, the respected widow who had ruled London's social scene for decades, was being led away in handcuffs along with her son and his mistress. "This is impossible," one of Eleanor's friends whispered to another. "Eleanor would never." "Eleanor has been stealing from me for 2 years, Naomi said clearly, addressing the room. "She's been helping Trevor siphon money from our joint accounts, forge my signatures on business documents, and plan this elaborate scheme to take my company. She even helped Brittany get hired as Trevor's secretary so they could work together more easily." Judge Harrison, one of Eleanor's oldest friends, stood up slowly. "Mrs. Clark, do you have evidence to support these claims?" "Boxes of it," Naomi replied. "Financial records, email chains, recorded phone conversations, witness statements. My legal team has been building this case for weeks." As the police led the three conspirators out of the dining room, Trevor turned back to look at Naomi one last time. "You've destroyed everything," he said bitterly. "No, Trevor. You destroyed everything. I just made sure everyone found out about it. After they were gone, the dining room fell into stunned silence. 40 of London's most prominent citizens sat around Eleanor's elegant table, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "Well," said Lord Pemberton finally, breaking the silence. "That was certainly more excitement than I expected from a birthday party." Several people laughed nervously, but Naomi could see the questions in their eyes. They were wondering how much they really knew about the people in their social circle. They were wondering what other secrets might be hiding behind perfect facades. Rachel approached Naomi with a satisfied smile. "That went even better than we planned. Trevor's confession, Eleanor's involvement, Brittany's panic, it's all on record now. What happens next?" Naomi asked. "Now we let the legal system do its work. Between the financial crimes, the business fraud, and the conspiracy charges, they're looking at serious jail time. Your divorce should be straightforward, no contest, complete asset protection, and probably a substantial settlement once Trevor's criminal assets are recovered." One of the guests, a woman Naomi vaguely remembered as Lady Patricia something, approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Clark, I owe you an apology. We all do. We believed what Eleanor told us about you." "What exactly did she tell you?" Naomi asked curiously. Lady Patricia looked embarrassed. "That you were unstable. That you were threatening Trevor, stealing from your business, drinking too much. She made it sound like you were having some sort of breakdown." Naomi nodded. She was setting the stage. Making sure that when Trevor announced he was leaving me, everyone would think it was justified. Making sure that if I tried to fight back, no one would believe me. "But you knew," Judge Harrison said admiringly. "You knew what they were planning. I figured it out 3 days ago. And then I spent every moment since then gathering evidence and building a case." Naomi looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. "The funny thing is, if Trevor had just asked for a divorce, I would have given him one. If he'd been honest about wanting to leave, we could have worked something out. But he got greedy. He wanted to destroy me completely, take everything I'd worked for, and leave me with nothing." "So you destroyed him instead," Lord Pemberton observed. "I let him destroy himself," Naomi corrected. "I just made sure everyone was watching when he did it." The next morning, Naomi sat in Rachel's hotel suite overlooking Hyde Park, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and financial records. The London newspapers were having a field day with the previous night's arrests, with headlines like "Society Scandal Rocks Kensington" and "American Wife Exposes Elite Fraud Ring." "The financial damage is worse than we initially thought," Rachel said, spreading bank statements across the coffee table. "Trevor and Eleanor didn't just steal from you, they've been running an elaborate money laundering operation for almost 2 years. Naomi studied the documents with growing amazement. "How much are we talking about?" "Close to £800,000. Trevor was selling your client information, Eleanor was investing the proceeds in offshore accounts, and they were planning to disappear the money entirely once the divorce was finalized." "Disappear it how?" Rachel pointed to a series of wire transfers. "They set up fake investment accounts in Brittany's name. The plan was for her to invest the stolen money, then claim the investments failed. The money would actually be moved to untraceable accounts in the Cayman Islands. But we caught them before they could complete the transfers?" "Barely. The final transfer was scheduled for today. If you hadn't discovered Trevor's plan when you did, they would have gotten away with everything." Naomi shook her head in disbelief. "I knew Trevor was greedy, but I never imagined he was capable of something this elaborate. The prosecutors are calling it one of the most sophisticated domestic fraud cases they've seen," Rachel continued. "Eleanor used her social connections to help legitimize the scheme. Several of her society friends unknowingly provided character references that helped Trevor open business accounts." A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Rachel checked the peephole and then opened it to admit Detective Inspector Chen and a tall man in an expensive suit. "Mrs. Clark, this is Crown Prosecutor James Whitfield. He'll be handling the criminal case against your husband and his co-conspirators." James Whitfield had kind brown eyes and an air of competent authority that immediately put Naomi at ease. "Mrs. Clark, I wanted to thank you personally for the thoroughness of your evidence gathering. It's rare to see such a well-documented case." "I had good motivation," Naomi replied dryly. "Indeed. I also wanted to discuss the financial recovery aspect of this case. Because we caught them before the final transfers, we should be able to recover most of the stolen funds. Your business accounts have been unfrozen, and your assets are secure. What about Eleanor's involvement? How much trouble is she in?" Detective Chen consulted her notes. "Quite serious trouble, I'm afraid. Conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, accessory to embezzlement. She's looking at 5 to 7 years in prison if convicted. And Trevor? 8 to 12 years. The judge yesterday denied bail. Flight risk, sophisticated nature of the crime, substantial financial resources still unaccounted for. James Whitfield leaned forward. There's something else you should know. Eleanor's arrest has triggered investigations into several other business deals she's been involved in over the past decade. Your case may have exposed a much larger pattern of financial manipulation. Naomi felt a surge of satisfaction. Good. How many other people has she destroyed over the years? We're still investigating, but preliminary evidence suggests at least 6 other victims. Mostly women who married into her social circle and then mysteriously lost businesses or assets during difficult divorces. Rachel whistled softly. She's been doing this for years. It appears so. Eleanor Clark built her reputation on being helpful to family members going through financial difficulties. What she was actually doing was helping manipulate those difficulties to benefit herself and her inner circle. The hotel room fell silent as the implications sank in. Eleanor hadn't just targeted Naomi because of racial prejudice, though that had certainly been a factor. She'd been running a long-term criminal enterprise, using her social status and connections to steal from vulnerable women. What happens to her estate? Naomi asked. The house, the investments, all of that wealth she's been accumulating? Criminal asset forfeiture will claim anything that can be traced to illegal activities, James explained. The victims will have first claim on recovered assets. Given the scope of what we're uncovering, Eleanor may lose everything. Detective Chen added, she's trying to negotiate a plea deal, claiming she was manipulated by Trevor. Her lawyers are arguing that she's an elderly woman who was influenced by her son's criminal activities. Naomi laughed bitterly. Eleanor Clark has never been influenced by anyone in her life. She was the mastermind behind this entire operation. That's what the evidence suggests, James agreed. Fortunately, your recordings make it very clear who was calling the shots. Rachel pulled out another folder. Speaking of evidence, we've had some interesting developments overnight. Brittany Walsh has decided to cooperate with the investigation. She's turning on Trevor? Completely. Faced with the prospect of prison time and the revelation that her husband is filing for divorce, she's decided to tell prosecutors everything she knows about the operation. What does she know? Detective Chen smiled grimly. Quite a lot, as it turns out. Brittany kept detailed records of all the stolen client information, thinking she might need leverage someday. She also recorded several conversations with Eleanor where they discussed expanding the operation to target other wealthy wives. She recorded Eleanor? Apparently Brittany didn't trust anyone, including her co-conspirators. She has hours of audio evidence of Eleanor explaining exactly how the fraud worked and discussing previous victims. Naomi felt a deep sense of vindication. So Eleanor can't claim she was just following Trevor's lead. Not with Brittany's evidence, James confirmed. The recordings make it clear that Eleanor was the experienced criminal, and Trevor was following her proven methods. The prosecutor stood up and gathered his papers. Mrs. Clark, I want you to know that this case is going to serve as a model for prosecuting sophisticated domestic fraud. Your courage in fighting back has likely saved other women from becoming victims. After the legal team left, Naomi and Rachel sat in comfortable silence, watching London wake up outside the hotel windows. How are you feeling? Rachel asked finally. Honestly? Relieved. For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I can breathe properly. I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying, always feeling like something was wrong but not being able to put my finger on it. Trevor was gaslighting you, making you doubt your instincts, question your memory, feel like you were overreacting to legitimate concerns. He was so good at it too. Whenever I questioned discrepancies in our finances, he'd act hurt that I didn't trust him. When I worried about his late nights at work, he'd accuse me of being paranoid and controlling. Rachel nodded knowingly. Classic manipulation tactics. The fact that you saw through it and fought back shows incredible strength. I'm just glad I found out before they could complete their plan. If I'd discovered this after the fact, you would have fought back then too, Rachel said confidently. That's who you are, Naomi. You don't give up and you don't let people destroy you. Naomi's phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant back in New York. All clients have been notified about Trevor's arrest. 3 new major contracts came in this morning. Everyone wants to work with the woman who brought down an international fraud ring. It looks like business is booming, Naomi told Rachel with a smile. Are you surprised? You just proved that you're smart enough to outmaneuver a sophisticated criminal operation and strong enough to fight back against people who tried to destroy you. What client wouldn't want someone like that representing their interests? As Naomi looked out at the London skyline, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete optimism about the future. The nightmare was over and her real life was just beginning. 3 days after the arrests, Naomi was packing her belongings in the hotel room when Rachel burst in with a look of absolute astonishment on her face. "You're not going to believe what Brittany just told the prosecutors," Rachel said, dropping a thick folder on the bed. "More stolen client information? Much worse. Brittany wasn't just Trevor's mistress and business partner. She's been running cons on wealthy men for years. Trevor wasn't her first victim, he was just her most successful one." Naomi stopped packing and stared at her friend. "What do you mean?" Rachel opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. "Remember how I said Brittany was cooperating? Well, she's been very cooperative. She gave prosecutors details about at least 7 other men she's targeted over the past 5 years. The photographs showed Brittany with different men in expensive restaurants, at charity galas, on luxury vacations. In each photo she looked slightly different hair color, different style of dress, different persona entirely. She's a professional con artist," Rachel continued. "She targets successful married men, gets hired by their companies, initiates affairs, and then works with accomplices to steal money and business information." Accomplices? Eleanor wasn't her first partner either. Brittany has been working with wealthy older women for years. They provide social legitimacy and help her access elite circles, while she provides the youth and sex appeal to manipulate the targets. Naomi sat down heavily on the bed, still processing this information. "So Eleanor has done this before?" "At least 3 times that we know of. The pattern is always the same: find a successful man with a wealthy wife, help Brittany get close to him, orchestrate the affair, then systematically steal everything they can before disappearing." But Trevor wasn't going to disappear. He was planning to marry Brittany. Rachel's expression grew even more serious. "That's because this time was different. This time Brittany was planning to kill you." The words hit Naomi like a physical blow. "What?" "The final phase of their plan involved making you disappear permanently. They were going to drug you at the birthday party, stage a suicide, and then Trevor would inherit everything as the grieving widower." Naomi felt sick. The birthday party? Brittany had access to psychiatric medications through one of her previous marks, a psychiatrist she conned 2 years ago. The plan was to slip the drugs into your wine during Trevor's announcement speech, when everyone was focused on the drama. You would have appeared to have a breakdown, been taken to your room to recover, and been found dead the next morning. "My God," Naomi whispered. "They were planning to murder me." Eleanor suggested it, according to Brittany's statement. She said killing you was cleaner than a messy divorce, especially since they weren't sure the embezzlement scheme would hold up in court. Rachel sat down beside Naomi and took her hand. "The only reason it didn't happen was because you discovered the plan early and took control of the situation. If you hadn't acted when you did." Naomi felt a wave of retroactive terror wash over her. She had been so focused on the financial betrayal and public humiliation that she hadn't realized her life had been in actual danger. Does Trevor know about the murder plan? According to Brittany, he was reluctant at first, but Eleanor convinced him it was the only way to be sure they got everything. She told him that even if they successfully framed you for embezzlement, you might still fight back and expose them. Killing you guaranteed their safety. "So all 3 of them were planning to kill me?" "Yes. And Brittany has evidence. She recorded conversations about the murder plan because she was nervous about getting caught. She wanted to be able to blame Trevor and Eleanor if anything went wrong." Naomi stood up and walked to the window, trying to process this new information. What kind of drugs were they planning to use? A combination of psychiatric medications and alcohol that would have caused what appeared to be a psychotic break followed by respiratory failure. The autopsy would have shown you died of an accidental overdose while having a mental health crisis. And everyone at the party would have witnessed me having a breakdown, so it would have seemed believable. Exactly. Eleanor had spent months telling people you were unstable. Trevor's announcement would have provided the trigger. Your apparent suicide would have seemed like the tragic but inevitable result of mental illness and public humiliation. Rachel pulled out another document. Here's the really disturbing part: this wasn't even Brittany's idea originally. She learned the technique from her very first partner, a woman named Caroline Henley, who was convicted of murdering 3 wealthy wives in similar circumstances. How is this woman still walking free? She wasn't until recently. Caroline got out of prison last year and immediately contacted Brittany about partnering up again. But Brittany was already working with Eleanor and decided she didn't need Caroline's help anymore. So Eleanor was the replacement partner. A much more sophisticated one. Caroline was crude, obvious. Eleanor brought social connections, respectability, and decades of experience manipulating wealthy people. Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. How many women has Eleanor killed? We don't know yet. The investigators are looking into suspicious deaths connected to her social circle over the past 15 years. There are at least 4 cases where wealthy wives died suddenly during divorce proceedings, and Eleanor was closely connected to the families involved. This is so much bigger than I thought. Rachel nodded grimly. The prosecutors are calling it one of the most sophisticated murder-for-profit schemes they've ever encountered. Eleanor used her position in London society to identify targets, Brittany handled the seduction and manipulation, and they worked together to eliminate obstacles and steal assets. What's going to happen to them now? With the murder conspiracy charges added to the fraud charges? Eleanor and Trevor are looking at life in prison. Brittany might get a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation, but she's still facing decades behind bars. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Rachel checked the peephole and opened it to admit James Whitfield, the Crown prosecutor. Mrs. Clark, I apologize for interrupting, but we need to discuss your security arrangements. Security arrangements? Caroline Henley, Brittany's former partner, is still out there. We don't know if she's aware of Brittany's arrest yet, but when she finds out, she may see you as a threat. You're the person who exposed their entire operation. Naomi felt her stomach drop. You think she might come after me? It's a possibility we have to take seriously. Caroline is violent, experienced, and has nothing left to lose. We're recommending protective custody until she's apprehended. How long will that take? We're not sure. Caroline has been living under false identities for years. Finding her could take weeks or months. Rachel squeezed Naomi's hand. We'll figure this out. Your safety is the most important thing. As Naomi looked at the concerned faces around her, she realized that even though she had won the battle against Trevor and Eleanor, the war might not be over. There was still a dangerous woman out there who might see her as an enemy to be eliminated. But Naomi had learned something important over the past few days. She was stronger than she had ever imagined, smarter than her enemies had given her credit for, and absolutely unwilling to be anyone's victim. If Caroline Henley wanted a fight, she was going to get one. 2 weeks later, Naomi sat in a secure conference room at the London Metropolitan Police Headquarters, watching Caroline Henley through one-way glass. The woman who had taught Brittany how to murder wealthy wives was smaller than Naomi had expected, barely 5 feet tall, with graying blonde hair and the kind of unremarkable appearance that would blend into any crowd. She doesn't look like a killer, Naomi observed. Detective Inspector Chin stood beside her, reviewing a thick file. That's what made her so effective. Caroline can transform herself to match whatever a mark wants to see. Maternal figure, sophisticated companion, helpless victim, she's played every role. How did you find her? Brittany's cooperation was the key. She provided details about Caroline's habits, her preferred false identities, her safe houses. We tracked her to a rented flat in Brighton, where she was planning to disappear completely. James Whitfield entered the room with a satisfied expression. Caroline just agreed to a plea deal. Life in prison without parole in exchange for full cooperation about her past crimes. What did she tell you? Everything. Caroline has been killing wealthy women for almost 20 years. She's confessed to 11 murders across 3 countries, including 2 of the suspicious deaths connected to Eleanor's social circle. Naomi felt a wave of relief and horror. Relief that this woman would never hurt anyone again, horror at the scope of her crimes. What about the others? Trevor, Eleanor, Brittany? Trevor pleaded guilty to all charges yesterday. He's looking at 15 years minimum. Eleanor is still fighting, but with Caroline's testimony and Brittany's evidence, her case is hopeless. And Brittany? 8 years in exchange for her cooperation. She'll be eligible for parole in 5, but she'll be deported to the United States afterward. Her visa was obtained fraudulently, even her immigration documents were fake. Detective Chen pulled out another folder. There's something else you should know. Caroline's confession has opened up cold cases across Europe. Interpol estimates she may have been involved in as many as 20 murders over the past 2 decades. 20 women, Naomi said quietly. 20 women who fought back against abusive or unfaithful husbands and paid for it with their lives. Caroline specialized in cases where the wives had significant assets and were beginning to discover their husbands' betrayals. James Whitfield sat down across from Naomi. Your case was different because you discovered the plot before they could complete it. Most of Caroline's victims never saw it coming until it was too late. What made the difference? Your professional background helped you understood financial records and business documents. Your instincts were sharp, you knew something was wrong even before you found direct evidence. And you had resources, good lawyers, investigators, connections. Most importantly, Detective Chin added, you didn't let them isolate you. Caroline's usual method involved cutting victims off from support systems, making them doubt their own judgment, creating situations where they had no one to turn to for help. Naomi thought about the past few weeks and realized how true that was. If she hadn't had Rachel, if she hadn't trusted her own instincts, if she hadn't acted quickly and decisively, she would have become another statistic. There's going to be a lot of media attention around this case, James warned. The connection between Caroline's murders and Eleanor's social circle has created a scandal that's reaching the highest levels of British society. What kind of attention? Book deals, movie offers, documentary producers. The story of an American woman who exposed an international murder conspiracy is fascinating to a lot of people. Rachel, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. Naomi's already had 3 publishers contact her, and 2 film studios have expressed interest in the rights to her story. I haven't decided if I want that kind of publicity, Naomi said. You should consider it, Detective Chin suggested. Your story could help other women recognize the warning signs of this type of manipulation. Caroline and her associates targeted women who felt isolated and vulnerable. Publicity could prevent future victims. James nodded in agreement. The prosecutors across Europe are hoping to use your case as a model for identifying and prosecuting similar crimes. Your evidence-gathering techniques and legal strategy have already been adopted by law enforcement agencies in 6 countries. The conference room door opened, and a young police officer entered with a message for Detective Chin. She read it quickly and then looked up with a smile. Eleanor Clark just changed her plea to guilty on all charges. Apparently Caroline's confession convinced her that fighting was pointless. What's her sentence? Life in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 25 years, when she's 95 years old. Naomi felt a deep sense of closure. The woman who had tried to destroy her life was going to spend the rest of her own life in prison. Trevor, who had betrayed her trust and planned her murder, was facing decades behind bars. Brittany, who had been willing to kill for money, was going to lose her freedom and her citizenship. What happens now? Naomi asked. Now you go home and rebuild your life, James said. The legal system will handle the rest. Rachel pulled out her phone and showed Naomi a series of messages. Your business is doing better than ever. You have companies across 3 continents wanting to hire you. The woman who exposed an international conspiracy and survived a murder plot is apparently very popular with corporate clients. They want someone who can spot fraud and fight back against corruption, Detective Chin added. Your reputation has gone from successful marketing executive to investigative genius who can uncover any deception. As they prepared to leave the police station, James Whitfield shook Naomi's hand. Mrs. Clark, I want you to know that your courage has saved lives. Caroline's arrest has prevented her from targeting future victims, and the investigation has exposed corruption networks across multiple countries. I just didn't want them to get away with destroying me. You did much more than protect yourself. You protected dozens of women who would have been Caroline's future targets. You exposed a criminal network that had been operating for decades. You proved that these predators can be stopped if someone is brave enough to fight back. Outside the police station, London was bustling with afternoon traffic and tourists. Naomi breathed in the cool air and felt truly free for the first time in months. Ready to go home? Rachel asked. More than ready, Naomi replied. I have a business to run and a life to rebuild. As their taxi pulled away from the police station, Naomi looked back at the building where Caroline Henley was being held. The woman who had killed 20 innocent women would never hurt anyone again. The conspiracy that had tried to destroy her was completely dismantled. Trevor, Eleanor, and Brittany had thought they were dealing with a weak, isolated victim who would be easy to manipulate and eliminate. Instead, they had chosen the wrong woman entirely. Naomi Clark was a survivor, a fighter, and a winner. And now the whole world knew it. 6 months later, Naomi stood in her newly renovated Manhattan office, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The brass nameplate on her desk read, Naomi Clark, CEO Clark Global Investigations, reflecting the evolution of her business from marketing consultancy to corporate fraud detection and prevention. Her assistant knocked and entered with a stack of contracts. 3 more Fortune 500 companies want to hire us for fraud prevention audits, and the London Times wants to interview you about the new security legislation that's being passed because of your case. Schedule the interviews for next week, Naomi said, signing the contracts without hesitation. And call Rachel, I want her input on the European expansion plans. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of growth, recognition, and new opportunities. What had started as a personal nightmare had transformed into a professional triumph that exceeded her wildest dreams. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Inspector Chin. Caroline's trial starts next week. Thought you'd want to know she's confessed to 3 more murders. Your case broke open the biggest serial killing conspiracy in European history. Naomi felt a familiar mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice was being served, sadness for all the women who hadn't been as fortunate as she had been. A knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. James Whitfield entered, looking very different from the serious prosecutor she'd met in London. Today he was wearing casual clothes and carrying a bouquet of flowers. I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced, he said with a shy smile. I wanted to congratulate you on the new office expansion. Over the past few months, James had visited New York several times, ostensibly for legal consultations about the ongoing international prosecutions. But their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something more personal. The flowers are beautiful, Naomi said, accepting the bouquet. How did the final appeals hearing go? Eleanor's appeal was denied. She'll be staying in prison for the rest of her life. Trevor's sentencing is final as well, 15 years, no possibility of early release. And Brittany? Deported last week. She's serving her sentence in a federal prison in Texas. Her husband finalized their divorce and remarried someone else. Naomi arranged the flowers in a vase on her desk, thinking about how completely her enemies' lives had been destroyed while her own had flourished. There's something else, James continued. The Crown Prosecution Service wants to offer you a consulting contract. They're creating a new unit specializing in sophisticated domestic fraud cases, and they want you to help train investigators. International consulting? Based in London, but working with law enforcement agencies across Europe and North America. You'd be helping other women in situations similar to what you went through. The offer was tempting. Naomi had discovered that she had a talent for uncovering deception and building legal cases. More importantly, she felt a deep sense of purpose in preventing other women from becoming victims. I'll think about it, she said. My business here is doing well, but the idea of helping other women fight back is appealing. Rachel appeared in the doorway, grinning broadly. Sorry to interrupt, but I have news that can't wait. What kind of news? The movie studio just increased their offer for your life rights. They want a fast-track production with a major actress attached to play you. James looked impressed. You're going to be a movie character. Apparently so, Naomi laughed. They want to call it The Birthday Trap, a thriller about an American woman who exposes an international murder conspiracy. Will you do it? If it helps other women recognize the warning signs of this kind of manipulation, yes. Detective Chin was right, publicity can prevent future victims. Rachel pulled out her tablet and showed them a news article. Speaking of publicity, look at this headline, Eleanor Clark dies in prison. She had a heart attack yesterday morning. Naomi felt a complex mix of emotions. She had wanted justice, not death, but she couldn't deny feeling relief that Eleanor Clark would never manipulate or hurt anyone again. She was 83 years old, James said quietly. She spent the last months of her life in a 6x8 cell, stripped of all the wealth and status she'd killed to maintain. What about her estate? Naomi asked. Everything's been liquidated to pay restitution to victims. Your portion should be transferred to your accounts within the week, close to £2 million after legal fees. £2 million on top of the money she'd already recovered, plus the explosive growth of her business, plus the movie deal. Naomi had gone from nearly losing everything to being wealthier than she'd ever imagined possible. There's irony there, she observed. Eleanor tried to steal my money and ended up making me rich. Justice has a sense of humor sometimes, Rachel agreed. James's phone rang and he stepped away to take the call. When he returned, his expression was serious. That was Interpol. They've identified 2 more murder victims connected to Caroline's network, and they think there may be other accomplices still operating. They want to expand the international task force. More women like Eleanor? Possibly. Caroline's methods were too sophisticated for her to have developed them alone. There may be an entire network of wealthy women using their social positions to facilitate murders for profit. Naomi felt a familiar surge of determination. Then we need to stop them. I'm accepting the consulting contract. This can't be allowed to continue. James smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. And I should mention the London position would involve significant travel to New York for coordination with American law enforcement. How significant? Significant enough that I've been looking at apartments in Manhattan. Naomi felt her heart skip a beat. Over the past few months, she'd found herself looking forward to James's visits more than she cared to admit. He was intelligent, principled, and had proven himself to be completely trustworthy during the most difficult period of her life. Apartments in Manhattan are expensive, she said lightly. I've heard that. I was hoping someone might be able to recommend a good neighborhood. Rachel cleared her throat diplomatically. I'm going to go check on those contract negotiations. You two can discuss real estate without me. After Rachel left, James moved closer to Naomi's desk. I know this is complicated. Your divorce isn't even final yet, and we've been working together professionally. The divorce will be final next month, Naomi interrupted. Trevor's in prison, so he can't contest anything. And our professional relationship has been the most honest and supportive partnership I've ever had. I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of the situation. Naomi walked around her desk to stand in front of him. James, you helped me bring down an international murder conspiracy. You've spent 6 months flying across the ocean to help me build legal cases and expand my business. You've been nothing but respectful and professional, even when I could tell you wanted to be more than that. You could tell? I'm very good at reading people now. It's become a professional skill. James laughed. In that case, would you like to have dinner tonight? Somewhere that's not a law enforcement facility or a courtroom. I'd love to, Naomi replied. But I should warn you, dating me comes with some unusual baggage. International media attention, ongoing legal proceedings, possible testimony in future murder trials. I think I can handle it. After all, I'm dating a woman who single-handedly exposed the most sophisticated murder conspiracy in European history. How dangerous could it be? As Naomi looked into James's kind brown eyes, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete trust in another person. He had seen her at her most vulnerable and her most powerful, and he had been steadfast through all of it. Trevor had tried to destroy her, but he had inadvertently led her to someone infinitely better. Eleanor had tried to kill her, but she had survived to build a life beyond anything she could have imagined. The conspiracy that was meant to eliminate her had instead made her stronger, wealthier, and more successful than ever before. Sometimes, Naomi thought, the best revenge really was living well. 1 year after the birthday party that changed everything, Naomi stood in the ballroom of the Mandarin Oriental in London, surrounded by 300 guests celebrating the launch of the Clark Foundation for Victim Advocacy. The woman who had once been targeted for murder was now funding legal support for other women facing domestic violence and financial abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies announced, please welcome our keynote speaker, Naomi Clark. As Naomi approached the podium, she could see familiar faces in the crowd. Rachel, now her business partner and foundation co-director. Detective Inspector Chin, who had become a close friend and frequent collaborator. James, handsome in his tuxedo, watching her with obvious pride and admiration. But tonight wasn't about celebrating her survival or her success. Tonight was about ensuring that other women would have the resources and support to fight back against predators who tried to destroy them. 2 years ago, Naomi began, her voice carrying clearly through the elegant ballroom, I was living a lie. I thought I had a happy marriage, financial security, and a successful business. What I actually had was a husband who was stealing from me, a mother-in-law who was planning to kill me, and a mistress who was part of an international murder conspiracy. The room was completely silent, hanging on her every word. I was lucky. I discovered their plan before they could complete it. I had resources, education, money, professional connections, legal expertise. Most importantly, I had people who believed in me and helped me fight back. Naomi paused, looking out at the faces staring back at her. But not every woman is that lucky. Not every woman has the resources to expose elaborate fraud schemes or the support system to survive attempted murder. That's why we're here tonight. She gestured to a large screen behind her, which displayed statistics about domestic financial abuse and intimate partner violence. Every year, thousands of women are financially destroyed by partners who manipulate, steal, and abuse. Many more are killed by people who are supposed to love and protect them. The Clark Foundation exists to level the playing field. The screen changed to show photos of the foundation's first clients, women who had been helped to escape abusive relationships, expose financial fraud, and rebuild their lives. We provide legal support, financial resources, investigative services, and safe housing for women who are fighting back against abuse. We also work with law enforcement agencies around the world to identify and prosecute sophisticated domestic crimes. Applause filled the ballroom, but Naomi raised her hand for silence. But this foundation isn't just about helping individual women. It's about changing the system that allows predators to operate with impunity. We're funding research into financial abuse patterns, training programs for law enforcement, and legal precedents that will make it easier to prosecute these crimes. The screen displayed a map showing the Foundation's international reach offices in London, New York, Sydney, and Toronto, with plans for expansion into 12 more cities. The network that tried to kill me operated across 3 countries and had been active for over 20 years. They destroyed dozens of lives and stole millions of dollars. They were only stopped because one woman, me, had the resources and determination to fight back. Naomi's voice grew stronger as she continued. But what if every woman had those resources? What if every victim had access to the best legal representation, the most skilled investigators, the strongest support system? What if we could identify these predators before they claimed their first victim? The audience was completely engaged now, leaning forward to catch every word. That's the vision of the Clark Foundation. A world where women don't have to fight alone. A world where predators face immediate, overwhelming resistance instead of isolated, vulnerable targets. She clicked to the final slide, which showed the Foundation's logo and mission statement. Strength in numbers, justice in action. Tonight, we're announcing partnerships with law enforcement agencies in 15 countries, legal advocacy groups on 4 continents, and research institutions around the world. We're creating an international network that will make it impossible for people like Caroline Henley, Eleanor Clark, and Trevor Clark to operate in the shadows. The applause was thunderous now, with many guests rising to their feet. The money you donate tonight will go directly to helping women fight back. Every dollar will fund legal cases, investigation services, safe housing, and support programs. Every dollar will help level the playing field between predators and their intended victims. Naomi smiled as she looked out at the enthusiastic crowd. I was targeted because someone thought I was weak, isolated, and easy to destroy. They thought wrong. Tonight, we're making sure that every woman has the strength, resources, and support to prove predators wrong. As she left the podium to sustained applause, James met her at the bottom of the steps with a kiss and a proud smile. Perfect speech, he said. You're going to change the world. We're going to change the world, Naomi corrected. I couldn't do any of this without you, Rachel, and everyone else who believed in me. Rachel appeared beside them, practically glowing with excitement. The donations are already pouring in. We've raised over $2 million just tonight, and the corporate sponsors are exceeding their commitments. What's the total funding now? $15 million, plus ongoing commitments from major foundations and government agencies. We'll be able to help thousands of women in the first year alone. As the evening continued, Naomi moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and discussing the foundation's work. She spoke with judges who wanted to collaborate on legal reform, police chiefs interested in training programs, and survivors who wanted to volunteer their time and expertise. But the moment that meant the most came when a young woman approached her near the end of the evening. Mrs. Clark, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I wanted to thank you personally. Thank me for what? 6 months ago, my husband tried to destroy me the same way Trevor tried to destroy you. He was stealing from my business, having an affair with my assistant, and planning to leave me with nothing. But I recognized the pattern because of your case. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I hired lawyers who specialized in financial fraud, documented everything, and built a case just like you did. My husband is in prison now, and I kept my business and my assets. You fought back. I fought back because you showed me how. Your story gave me the roadmap and the courage to protect myself. Naomi felt her own eyes welling up. That's exactly why we're doing this work. So other women don't have to figure it out alone. The foundation helped me too. When I couldn't afford the best investigators, your emergency fund covered the costs. When I needed safe housing during the trial, your partnership with domestic violence shelters provided it. Sarah handed Naomi a check. This is my contribution to the foundation. It's not much, but I want to help other women the way you helped me. The check was for $50,000, a substantial amount for a small business owner who had just survived financial abuse. Sarah, this is incredibly generous. It's an investment in justice. Every woman who fights back and wins makes it harder for predators to find victims. Eventually, we'll make this type of crime impossible. As the evening wound down, Naomi found herself on the hotel's terrace with James, looking out at the London skyline. The same city where Trevor had tried to destroy her was now hosting a celebration of her triumph and her mission to help other women. Any regrets? James asked, taking her hand. About what? Any part of it. The publicity, the foundation, moving to London, getting involved with a prosecutor who spends his time chasing international criminals. Naomi laughed. You mean dating a woman who exposed an international murder conspiracy and now runs a global advocacy organization? I think you're the one taking the bigger risk. I love that you're changing the world. I love that you refuse to be anyone's victim. I love that you turned the worst experience of your life into a mission to help other people. I love that you saw me at my lowest point and believed I was strong enough to fight back. I love that you've been beside me through every step of building this new life. James pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Naomi's heart started racing. Naomi Clark, you're the strongest, most brilliant, most courageous woman I've ever met. You've shown me what it means to fight for justice, to protect the vulnerable, and to never give up. He dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life supporting your mission and loving you? Naomi looked down at the man who had helped her rebuild her life, who shared her passion for justice, who had proven his loyalty and love through the most difficult year of her life. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. As James slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, Naomi thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Trevor's betrayal had led her to true love. Eleanor's murder plot had led her to her life's mission. The conspiracy that was meant to destroy her had instead created opportunities beyond her wildest dreams. Looking out at the London lights, Naomi felt complete gratitude for her survival, her success, and her future. She had taken her enemies' worst intentions and transformed them into the foundation for a life dedicated to protecting other women. Trevor, Eleanor, and Brittany had tried to write the ending to her story. Instead, they had simply provided the prologue to something much greater. The real story, the story of justice, empowerment, and love was just beginning.